Welcome, Immortalized, to another round of the conversations. A few days ago, I had a chat with Sam Sethi, who is the co-host of the Podnews Weekly podcast. He is a radio presenter, a DJ of the River Radio, owner of the River radio station, and also an app developer and CEO of the new Podfans progressive web application. He is a fascinating character who has had a long history in the tech sector. So we started off with some of his thoughts about the internet, of working for Netscape and MicroStrategy and some other big companies back in those days, before getting on to some of the cool new applications that you can find, features, if you will, in the Podfans web application, and how this connects into Bitcoin, micropayments, and some of the very cool stuff going on at Podcasting 2.0, before finally ending off with a bit more tech talk about the future, about what we can see, what we can expect, and what he is looking forward to. So with all of that being said, I do hope you enjoy.
I mean, the thing you found out about Mother Teresa is true. I was adopted from Mother Teresa.
Yeah, no, I listened to a podcast full on that. What I found interesting most of that was your story, where you found out about your adoption, and maybe I can get you to repeat that quickly. But the juxtaposition between that kind of lack of curiosity you had there, and then nowadays,
curious nature.
Yeah, I find that pretty interesting. You want to just repeat that quickly, if you don't mind?
Yeah, so obviously at 14, I found out I was adopted by my parents moving house, and I found the documents by mistake. Didn't say anything. My wife was like, how's that possible that you didn't go up to your mum and dad, and say, look, I found this. What's the Scoobies? Personally, because I loved them so much, I didn't want to hurt them. That was in my head. So that was the first reason. And when we went to India, me and my wife, for the first time with her, we had time to go to Mother Teresa. And it's not that I'm not curious. I just know that I'm opening up a Pandora's box by going to find them. The story of the long-lost Maharaja who's been found, and the palace is excited, and there's flowers everywhere, and wow, he's come back. No, that wasn't the story. The story was, I was either illegitimate or I was one of a long line of children, right? And as you pointed out earlier, I'm not a fan of cricket. I just haven't loved it. I'm culturally English and not Indian. I mean, that's just through time and age. And so, I could go back, and there were maybe 4 or 5 older adults who were my siblings who looked like me maybe, but we would have nothing culturally together. We would have total separation. I mean, I live a very fortunate life here. Knowing what I knew, if they were poor, I wouldn't have been able to walk away. I'm opening up too many cans that I don't need to open up. And on that basis, I said, no, let's stop.
Yeah, I think that's maybe a good point to highlight, because it's not exactly lack of curiosity then. It's because when I heard that story, I was thinking, it probably doesn't just end there. It doesn't just end with Sam looking at the document, putting it away, and then it's forgotten. It's probably there's a full there's a lot of things going on in the brain and mind when something like that pops up.
Yeah, I mean, there was that film with Dev Patel and Nicole Kidman called Lion, which came out of Australia. And when that film came out, it was about the story of a lost boy who's gone back to find his parents and all this. And my phone just went off the Richter. Everyone in my mate, it's a film about you. It's a film about you. I went, yeah. Apart from the fact my mum's not Nicole Kidman.
Yeah. Correct.
Other than that was pretty good. Yeah.
Yeah. Writing films for people, and it's like it's written for you. You're the target audience of one for that one.
Exactly.
I'm curious as to why you joined the army after leaving school. Based on all your other,
you have done your research.
Yeah, your career. Well, I'll write it out now. You were career hopping before it was cool. Systems engineer, marketing director, blogger, radio presenter, podcaster, app developer, and CEO. So, and I'm sure there's a couple more in between.
Yeah, DJ. So why the army? So I went to a private school that had that sort of, it's called Combined Cadet Force here in the UK. I don't know, maybe called something else elsewhere. Yeah. I had a place at Warwick University to do accounting. Didn't really want to do it. I had a dad who was an accountant and a mum whose uncles were all generals in the Indian Army. I just prefer the outdoor life. I played rugby. I played every sport that I could play, and I really didn't join it with the thinking of, oh, I'm going to go to another land and kill people. It was more a case of, hey, I can go and run around fields and jump out of planes and just basically live a active life traveling the world. That's all I saw, and I didn't see the other part of the side of the army. Maybe I was just too naive, but yeah.
No,
And too young. I was only 18, really.
yeah. My co-host Juan wanted to join the reserves here, and I think his well, he doesn't have the excuse of being 18. He was still wanting to do that a year or two ago, and I was just going, I don't think it's all obstacle courses and and running around. I think it's a little bit of a other,
Yeah.
the business of protection and things like that. So yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it does very it does stick out though compared to all the other ones, because the others are very much more, I suppose, creation and future focused. I suppose when I think of the army, I usually think of destruction.
Yeah, there is that, but I mean, I think it's more leadership. I mean, I would say I'm an extrovert. I am an extrovert. You stick me in a room of strangers, I will make friends very quickly, and I will connect with people.
Mm-hmm.
I enjoy that. I like doing that. That's because I'm interested in what other people's stories are. I think that's where that curiosity comes. And I think leadership is just something innate. You either have it or you don't. I don't believe you can go on a leadership course. People do, but I don't think you can train people to be leaders, as in someone who's not a leader naturally can become a leader. I think there are people who make good entrepreneurs. I think they have leadership skills. I think people who make CEO generally would have made CEO at a company somewhere. So the leadership thing was part of it. After that, really, the creative part. I mean, I ended up doing the stupid thing of going to work in the City of London straight after the army. Typical army. What do you do next? I don't know. Go and join the city.
Like it's a job.
And I hate, well, it's like, it's an old boys network, a lot of ex-army officers are up in the city as brokers, and you just go and join them, right? It's an old school thing. And I hated it. Sat behind a laptop, pressing a button when it went red, pressing a button when it went blue. And I just happened to be old enough to find out when Microsoft first ever came out with Excel, 1.0. And Windows 3, 3.1. No, it wasn't 3.1. It would have been earlier than that. And then, they didn't even have Word. And I was given the job of, go and create something in the corner with this thing. It's called a, Windows operating system, and there's a mouse. And I didn't know much about it, but I ended up creating a stock and options trading system laptop, on a laptop. I wouldn't call it a trading system. That's far too grand. It's a spreadsheet with a couple of numbers in it, right? But at the time, it looked like it was very important. And Microsoft heard about it through the grapevine, invited me to come and present about it. And subsequently, I joined them. Yeah.
Yeah. What was so I was born in 1992, so I missed a lot of the build up to the internet, I guess. And I can just kind of remember not really having it in a way. It was
wow.
It was kind of on that boundary point. How do things now compare to the feeling? So there's this really awesome clip of David Bowie in 1999 talking about the internet. I recommend everyone go check that out if they can. And he's so far ahead. He's describing how it's almost like this life form. This is going to completely radicalize, change everything. Mediums are going to get disrupted, and the interviewer's kind of like, yeah, okay, okay, David. Does the, I suppose, blockchain, the Bitcoin, Web3, if you want to call it that, has it got the same sort of feeling in the air compared to the internet and how that was coming out?
Yeah, it has. It has in many ways. I think every real change in the internet feels like a step change. I mean, I think I saw somewhere the other day that somebody said Web3 wasn't the metaverse. Web3 is AI, and I can kind of get behind that one. I don't think the metaverse is anything that I've ever got excited about. The blockchain, I don't think was Web3. I think it was a step change along the way. So I do remember leaving Microsoft, joining Netscape, and walking in the door, and I'd just seen, while I was at Microsoft, actually, strangely, I had seen the internet. We'd gone down to a company called DEC, Digital Equipment, who were pioneers at the time still in, MIDI and mainframe systems, but they've got some really smart engineers who were looking at this thing called the internet. And I remember going down to see them and them showing me this green screen, and it was really cluggy, and it was like going back to DOS. I was like, oh, give me a break. This is never going to take off. But I left Microsoft, joined Netscape, saw the browser. And in the same way that we are talking today about, it's called a SAT, and there's an invoice, and you have a digital wallet, and people look at us and go, I don't see that's going to ever take off. It's far too complex. Don't think it's going to work. Well, I remember sitting down in front of a large group of corporates going, yeah, it's called a browser. That's a URL, HTTP, stick with it, / //www. Yeah, now you type it. No, there is no search engine. Don't worry. Yeah, the screen's loading very slowly because that's a dial-up modem. Yeah, but it will get faster and it will get easier. And people are looking at me going, you're talking rubbish, Sam. And now we're here with the web. And I think the same thing is going to be, I can go to my bank account, I can top it up instantly into my digital wallet, and I will naturally want to pay per minute in micropayments. And it will just be the norm. But we are going through that learning and growing phase, and the mainstream is learning new vocabulary, and that scares people, and that challenges people. So when you say it's 6,000 sats, they go, oh my God, is that £6,000? $6,000? Do I need a mortgage? And that's why we often see somebody put out one sat with the famous expression, did that work? Did that work? Oh, it worked. Great. And so we're in that testing learning phase, and it will become natural.
Yeah. Okay. Is there anything that are different then? Because I was thinking about this the other day, and I'm almost saying I'm a reluctant geek. When I think of technology as a kid, I never had any particular interest in it. PlayStations, Game Boys, things like that. I only ever played them because my friends played them. Phone-wise, I had the cheapest, crappiest ones. Social media from 2013 to 2019, I had none. It was, it's almost like I intentionally, not intentionally, but I tend not to be gravitating towards these things. So it's actually really funny now where I'm kind of like diving onto the cutting edge. It's going from 0 to 100 really. And I hear a lot of things related to almost framing it as in, Bitcoin is much like the internet, or crypto is much like the internet. And I'm always curious as to like, is it though? Like how similar is that feeling? Because once again, I didn't go through it, so I can't have that comparison. In what ways is it different, for example? Is there anything that you've noticed that distinguishes it from how maybe all consuming it could be?
Okay, so let's take a step back. So when we were first showing the internet to people, TCP/IP had to be loaded. That and just explained as a stack layer in layer 2, blah blah blah, or what and then suddenly people are like, and then I have to find this browser because it wasn't in the operating system. And so that's the same as today. Yes, it's on the blockchain. Yes, you have to go and get a digital wallet. Yes, this thing is called a SAT. What the hell? How do I transfer it? I don't understand an invoice. All of that's very similar to feel to how do I find a web page? Where's the URL? People were sharing it. Yahoo was basically a manual entered directory listing by humans of web pages that existed. It was literally someone with a spreadsheet, fundamentally, just writing down web pages. That's how few web pages there were. The valuations by VCs of the future of the internet were astronomical. I mean, Pets R Us and people like that were in the 400-500 millions with no customers. We are seeing some of that hype cycle now. I look at some of there's a presentation tool called Tome, which is an AI tool which uses a little bit of DALL-E, so you can go in and use ChatGPT to write your presentation. Click a button, it writes the presentation. DALL-E puts your slide imagery together, and boom, you've got this great AI. They raised $40 million in less than 2 weeks, right? crazy. And of course now they look stupid, the people who invested, because Microsoft comes out with Copilot. I think we're going to go through a hype cycle again, and I think there's a little hype cycle. We saw that with Bitcoin, where it went up to $66,000, and then it's come down to a much more normal figure, and now it's beginning to rise naturally. So is there similarities? Yes, I think there are very much a similarity between Web 1, where we saw a massive growth and hype cycle, and where we are, let's call it Web 3, for want of a better word. I think mix it all in together, Bitcoin, AI, distributed computing again, etc., etc. I think it's all exciting. I'm excited. I don't know about anyone else, but I'm genuinely excited about the potential of where this is going to take us.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I mean, I'm excited as well in the sense that I'm not smart enough to predict the future and do that, but I kind of look at people like you, like at
modest.
Adam Curry, and I go, okay, well, they were there right when it was happening at the first time, and I'm kind of like, oh, well, Sam's interested in this boosting and in this value for value stuff, and I think actually that's the one that really got me the most. When I first found out about podcasting 2.0, I thought it was about the functionality, the features, chapters. Mm-hmm. Oh, that's really cool and whatnot.
Yeah.
But when I look back now and I realize, why was I having those sleepless nights? I've never had that before. I think it was this concept of value for value, and which spurned me to create the bloody podcast called Value for Value and things like that, and try and implement it more in my own life. So, yeah, it is exciting, hella exciting.
So Mark Andreessen, he didn't invent the browser, but he was certainly one of the people who was responsible for making the browser that we know. And his biggest regret when you listen to him is that he never created a micropayment system within the browser. Vince Cerf's biggest regret was he never created HTTPS.
Do you think it would have been possible back then to create micropayments?
I don't know. Technically, no, I don't think so. I think it would have been a failed system. I think the Bitcoin, the fixed amount, 21 million Bitcoin, makes it much more viable. I don't think without that bit of the micropayment system, I don't think it would have been similar to what Mark Zuckerberg tried to do. It would have been or it would have been what ETH is doing. It would have been a variable number that would have changed, and it would have been messy. But had it been around and had it been made available, then we wouldn't have advertising, that's for certain, as much as we have to support, because advertising became the mechanism to support creators with content. Hearts, likes, thumbs ups, those sentiments were the only way that users or consumers of that content could give any feedback. Oh, I loved what you did. That's great. Thumbs up, heart, like. And it was like, great. Well, that doesn't pay the bills. I can't go and buy a house or a car with that stuff. Whereas now I can say, right, yeah, Kyrin, that's amazing. Here's 1,000 sats or 10,000 sats or 100,000 sats, whatever the number I want. And that is tangible, fungible, non-fungible currency. It is, it's physically something you can take and convert back if you want to fiat or use it elsewhere. And I think what's more exciting is watching the banks are beginning to fail. That fractional banking system is beginning to fail. And you can start to see people go, well, what's the alternative? And the buttons are beginning to turn on for a lot of other people as well.
Yeah, it's really fun chatting with my dad, he's a pretty smart guy, and he grew up in the kind of Keynesian worldview, and I'm obviously very interested in Bitcoin, and so which is more of the Austrian, and so I was I was just trying to chat with him about inflation, and there is this huge gulf, this gap where it's almost like not crossable in some ways. And so it is very funny. Yeah. Like I look at fractional banking and I go, that is just, it doesn't make sense. It's like trying to make, 2 + 2 = 5, going back to George Orwell, that sort of level of manipulation. And it just does not compute.
Well, in a pre-internet world, it did compute because the time lag allowed you to do arbitrage on the money, which is really what you were allowed to do with fractional banking. So when we were going off track, but when the gold standard was dropped by the US and the UK, and gold wasn't required anymore as the underlying banking system, that's when, I mean, it was just basically people going, how can we make more money? So fundamentally, drop that. We don't need that. We don't need to peg ourselves to the gold standard, blah, blah, blah. We can print money eventually, blah, 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 blah. That's where we've got to, right? If you, I think, and we'll go back to podcasting, but I think if you look at the Russian SFS, which is the equivalent to SWIFT, when Russia was kicked out of the SWIFT system, and now you look at the BRIC countries, Russia, India, China, South Africa, Brazil, have all gravitated toward that and coming off SWIFT. And China and Russia are the only two countries that can back their currency with true gold. I think we've got some really big problems coming down the track in the West. And I think we're just beginning to see the cracks. It's quite scary.
Yeah, well, let's get on to more fun things while we're at it. So, in particular, I wanted to get you on with related to Podfans. So that was you're the CEO of Podfans, and
yes,
once again, and it's funny doing this research and finding out the birth origins of it, and it seems to once again be a bit of a troubled story, and it wasn't didn't seem to be like the inspiration from the get-go. Was it, so you were creating it for some other people, I believe, and then you give me the story, because I've heard bits and snippets from other.
Yeah, look, I've got my own radio station. I was doing that. I was podcasting with James. I was enjoying that whole world, not really looking to create a podcasting platform. A friend of a friend approached me and said, I mean, you must get this as well. Oh, I've got a great idea for a podcast. You do podcasting, don't you? Can you help me? And you feel like, I'm not sure I want to help. You know, this is just going to be, what mic do I use? How long should a podcast be? How do I do this? And I just didn't want to do anything. But I went for a drink with the guy. He used to be the CEO of Hello Magazine, and the other guy happened to be the ex-head of the Evening Standard. So two very credible people, no issue. I wouldn't have even contemplated a conversation had they been, two guys down the road who just thought they had an idea. So I went for the drink. They had no idea of running a startup. They had no idea of how to raise money. Their original plan was simply to get celebrities because of their background with media and celebrities and brands, and just smash the two. And all they wanted me to do originally was help them produce podcasts. And I was like, I'm not really sure I want to do this. They went off, talked to several people to try and raise money, and they could raise money really quickly. What happened was people said, unless you had a platform, we weren't going to do it. Now, through everything you hear me talk about on Podnews, have got a fairly good track record in understanding where we are with tech. And I thought, okay, this could be good fun. I could go and build a platform using all the podcasting 2.0 standards and features, and I could build something that's sort of at the bleeding edge of it all. So that's where my curiosity overcame my probably head and heart, right? My head should have said, no, this is going to be a waste of time because they don't know what they're doing. And my heart's going, actually, this will be great fun. This will be something you can get your teeth into. So I started building it, and we were 3 equal partners, 3 directors, nothing more, nothing less, a third each. That was it, straight down the line. And I said, as a passing comment, I don't need paying. I've been very lucky in previous startups I've done and bits and pieces, and I live fairly well. So I said, look, guys, we've not raised a great deal of money. We shouldn't pay ourselves. I certainly don't need to be paid. So when we get the next round of funding, that's when we'll do it. I built the platform, ready for an MVP, took it in front of investors. They loved it. But in that process of doing it, I found out from the bank account the other guys have been paying themselves, and I can't do that. That when I confronted them about it, it was, the trust had gone, and that's a very high thing for me. So I just went, no, guys, I'll get you to the MVP, which I did because I wanted to finish that and deliver, and then I said, there you go. There's Viral Tribe. You take it away. Do what you want with it. And I walked away, and I went back to my radio station, went back to doing the pod news with James, and I've got a wine business, and so there's stuff in my life I've got to do. I've got other things I do, and I was very happy. But that scratch, that itch, that little devil on your shoulder going, that was pretty cool. That was really cool. Something there. You should do that. And I was like, no, stop it, stop. It's like that little voice, stop it, go back to doing something else. And then the little voice going, no, but imagine if you did this and this and that and this. And that's where it came out. And 3 months passed, 4 months passed. And then I sat down and went, actually, that's where I'm passionate about. This is what I love doing. This is my current passion. It's the bleeding edge of where the internet is. If you combine podcasting with payments. So rolled the sleeves up again back in October, and got on with building Podfans.
Very cool. And so I guess it's not going to be focused on celebrity gossip and and all that. So I suppose on the high level, what are you trying to do with it? What do you want Podfans to be? And then we'll jump into what is it and what do you want to do with it?
Okay, so Podfans is a podcasting app. It's a desktop app at the moment. It's a PWA, so we won't be native iOS or Android for now, or at least foreseeably for the next at least 6 months. Yeah. Maybe we will, but I don't foresee it.
And PWA is Progressive Web App. That's correct.
Yeah, so that just means that it degrades nicely down to the screen size that you're looking at and functionally works on the screen correctly. And I think that's the way I want to go. I think iOS 16.4, which is in beta now, is going to give you all the things that most native iOS apps give you, like home screen icon, red dot badge notifications, push notifications, screen orientation. So suddenly Apple, thank you, have given app developers with progressive web apps all the same features and functions that a native iOS has. So I don't envisage that. But let's go back to what is Podfans. Podfans is a podcast platform. It's a curated platform. So we don't have all the 4 million podcasts that the Podcast Index has or that Apple has. And we are sticking more to the high end, to the top end with a bit of the long tail. We're not going to go all the way down to anchor users. We don't envisage them being on the platform. And I focused on 4 things: discovery, interactivity, gamification, and monetisation. So I firmly believe one of the biggest problems in podcasting is discovery. How do I find your podcast? How do I find something new that started yesterday? If you've got a big budget, of course you can advertise, of course you can do marketing. But if you have got a smaller budget or no budget, how do you get heard? And it's word of mouth. Well, I've built a search engine that uses some of the semantic tag features like person, location, category, keyword. So there's a way of finding it. You kindly did a video of the earlier version of Podfans. You'll be glad to see the new version of Podfans now allows you to, if you do search for a podcast and you can't find it, we then go back to the bigger index and find it for you.
Yeah. So I was playing around with that today.
Yeah. And so, we're trying to make it a little bit different. The interactivity, we talk about boostergrams, comments with payment. And that was, a step change forward. But I think as any podcaster, forget, boostergrams, but if you're on Apple or Spotify, you just want to go, oh no, at that point, I want to say something to the creator, or positive or negative, doesn't really matter, or start a conversation with other listeners. And that has been severely missing within the podcasting, structure. So again, interactivity was very important to me. So yes, threaded conversations, boostergrams, gamification is something I've been very interested in. Many of my other companies, startups, have that in it, but we didn't have the micropayment element. And gamification really is behavioral marketing. I love nudge marketing. And so gamification means that when you join, I've got 30 odd verbs in the system. So I can pay you sats for when you log in. I can pay you sats when you find the first podcast, when you discover something, when you make your first boostergram, and I can change the weighting on that by just changing the number of sats you earn.
Yeah.
And that, again, means that people are going to have leaderboards and badges, and there's going to be that element. Some people just hate that, right? Some people are just going to be, oh, I just want to go on, find a podcast, listen to it, and get off, right? And other people are going to be much more, yeah, this is exciting. I want to find more stuff and I want to share stuff. And what did I say? Discovery is word of mouth. So a lot of what we've built, again, is around those 4 pillars. The monetization part is critical. Now, what we've done with monetization is said that, as a podcast creator, this is the complex part. There are 3 levels in my system to payments. So we ingest through the open RSS the best podcasts we think are out there, right? And we're in an alpha, so it's a very limited database, but we're going to add all the 10,000, 12,000 value for value podcasts very shortly. We're adding the music podcast, and so our database will probably be probably when we finish it, 500,000 of the 4 million. But the core element of that is, as a creator, we want you to earn money through sats per minute. Now, it's a chicken and egg. We can either wait for everyone to claim their podcast and then start having listeners pay. So we created this idea of what we call a virtual wallet. So we set, as the admins of Podfans, a value. We say every podcast in the system is worth 100 sats per minute, just a generic number. And that means times the time of that podcast episode gives you the end value. So your episode might be an hour and a half long. There's 9,000 sats, right? As an example. And so, great. So that sets a value for how much this is worth from us, just an arbitrary value. When you claim your podcast as a host, you can go in and you can say, yeah, 100 sats per minute, I'm going to stay at that level. Or, no, I'm going to go to 0, or I'm going to go to 1,000 sats per minute. You as the creator set your value in the system, and that value per episode then changes. And you can actually set the value differently for every episode, actually. You don't have to have it generic for every one of your episodes. You can say, this podcast was only worth 100 sats per minute, but blimey, I've just had Tim Berners-Lee. Right, that's 10,000 sats per minute if you want to listen to that interview. So you can vary it.
Yeah, that's
but value for value. Sorry.
Yeah, can I just jump in with regards to this point? Because I've played around a bit with this, and this was where I was probably one of the most struggling points I had with it, to be honest, which was and now this could just be because I use sats a lot, and I've played, I've been in podcasting 2.0 for, 2 years now or something. And I kind of know what to look for, and I'm used to the same sort of things popping up. Okay, hit a streaming amount, put in this number, boost, do it this way. So having that expected value at the end, it is definitely a little bit, I suppose, curious for me, because I go, okay, well, what do I do with this? How do I use this? Is this so when I come into a show, for example, and there's an expected value of this, of, let's just say, 10,000 sats for an episode. And so that's calculated, I'm assuming by let's just say it's 100 minutes long. And so they're saying this is worth 100 sats a minute. That'll equal to 10,000.
Yep.
If I come in and with my normal 21 sats a minute, and I try to listen to that, will it kind of block me from listening to it, or how will that work?
Well, again, it's thanks to you, bit of feedback, but also we hadn't quite finished it when you reviewed it, but correct, you can see it's live today when you go back. We've put a little box right at the end, which simply shows what the streaming value per minute is in sats, so 100 sats per minute. And now you can just go into that box, type in 21 sats per minute, and it will recalculate. So the third level, which I was going to explain, was there's an admin level that we set for every podcast. There's a host level that when you claim your podcast, you reset the value. But the critical part of value for value is the user being able to set their own value, as you just said. So now when you go into Podfans, you can then go, oh, okay, so the host says it's 100 sats per minute. It's 10,000 sats in total value. Nah, that's not what I pay. I'm going to pay you 21 sats per minute. So you put in the number 21. It recalculates the end value and shows you the end value and also shows you in your local currency, Aussie dollars in your case. So you can see what the local currency is, what the SAT total value is, and also what you're prepared to pay. Now, as you also only pay per minute because you're streaming it, you won't pay the full amount if you don't listen to the full episode. So you might say, I'm going to listen to chapters 1, 3, and 5, or I'm going to listen to 7 minutes of this or 10 minutes of this. So 10 minutes times 21 will be your total value that you paid. And that's value for value.
Yeah. Okay. So
we have put.
Yeah, this is a good point just to get to, because I could hear, I could imagine Adam trying to strangle you through the screen saying like, that's not value for value if you're putting an expected value. But I suppose the stack is, it starts with the user. If the user wants to do something, they have priority of how much they can choose, they do it. If they come into it new, they don't really know how much a SAT is worth, something like that, it's going to the host, like the podcaster level, and I'm saying, here's just some expected values. And what's cool about that is once again, if I value this episode with you, if I think it's more higher, it's almost a signal to say, listen to this show first, which is hard because, I've got, I don't know how many episodes in this feed, probably 500 and 600, something like that. There's probably 10 episodes which I would love to have a bit more recommended higher to the top, and I think that might even be one of the tags coming out where you can kind of highlight which ones you want. I think I remember hearing something about that. And then I suppose even higher than that is if they don't want to ever use Podfans, but they still want to have value in there to be recognized as a value show. That's at the admin level, I'm guessing, i.e. the RSS feed. They just put their Lightning wallet in, and then it'll still just work.
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple of points there that I want to clarify. So yes, so the ultimate decision maker in setting the value is the listener, right? Mm-hmm. How much you're willing to pay. So what you're getting is the shirt you're wearing, right? In I'm not sure of Aussie law, but in the UK, it's called a tender price. It's not an actual price. So you walk in and it says that shirt is £50. And you take it off the hanger and you go, great. And you take it up to the front counter. Now, in legal law, I'm allowed to barter that. I know that you want £50 for that, and that's what it says on the price tag, but I'm willing to pay you 30 now. Will you take 30? Now, we're too British and stiff upper lip. We're not going to argue with it. You said 50, I'll pay 50. There you go. Lovely chap. Walk on. But the reality of law is I can actually barter that price. It's a tender price. It's an offer price. And in the same way with podcasting, the price you're stating, it's 100 sats per minute, 10,000 sats for this episode. That's my offer to you. And the reverse is, well, you know what? I'm going to now barter that back. I'm going to back you back and say 21 sats per minute is all I'm willing to pay you. Great. And then that's what happens. We've added a feature. You again, it's live in the admin for host creators, which I felt was much more fairer as well. It's called a lock value. So what happens is if you set it at 100 sats per minute and you click lock value, then I, as the listener, cannot change that value, right? You've suddenly worked your backside off to get Tim Berners-Lee onto your show to talk about what it was like to create the web. And you've set a value for that. And I come on and go, Kyrin, I'm going to give you 4 sats a minute. And you go, no, do you understand how hard it was for me to get this person? You're not valuing me as a creator. So we've given the creators as well another level of, I think fundamentally, I'm going to set this value and I'm locking in the value, and no, you can't barter me down. And if you can't afford to listen to this episode, I'm sorry, move on. There's a lot of other episodes in my catalog or other podcasts. So value for value is a two-way system. Yes, the user can set the value, but sometimes the host must be able to say, I'm sorry, you can't barter me down to 0 or near 0. I value the work I did and it's worth this, and I'm not going to change my mind.
Interesting. Yeah, I guess that's probably one of the points Adam would disagree. For me, it's interesting because so many of the tactics I guess you use or that I covered in when I was going through all those different shows and how they do it on the Value for Value podcast, I would be highlighting, okay, one of the ways you can get more support is using the sad puppy. There's kind of a classic one. You haven't got much support in for this week. You intentionally make your users feel bad, or your listeners or your producers, however you want to call them. And I think that's one of those ones where it's, what is the difference between setting a hard technical limit and setting a soft guilt limit? That's one of the things that I suppose would be up for debate. And so yeah, I'm really curious to see how that goes, and how, and then also how you implement that. If I come into that and it has that hard limit of 100 sats per minute, and I've got my default on 21, are you going to have a pop-up that says for this show it's going to be higher? Because once again, when it's getting towards money and sending money and money going missing, as you highlighted with your example at the start,
Yep.
I can see those problems. And even if it's 100 sats or 20 sats that goes missing, it can cause grief. So I'm curious as to how you'll navigate those problems.
I don't see where. Yeah, we're not going to have missing sats, because it's your choice whether you pay it or you don't pay it. So what happens is the box where you can change the value of the episode becomes grayed out.
Okay.
So it's locked, right? It fundamentally is. It'll say 100 sats per minute and it's grayed out. You can't change it, right? Yeah, we'll add some UI eventually, which will be like, why is this box gray? Why can't I change it? This is because of X. But functionally, right now, the box will be locked out, and you have the choice then of going, okay, well, I pay what he's asked, or I don't pay, right?
Yeah.
And Adam, I don't know what Adam's opinion will be on this, but
we'll find out.
Fundamentally, yeah, we will find out. And he may disagree with me, but my view is that sometimes people have worked really hard to create value, and other people can't just subjugate that value to zero. And I'm sorry, there are times when people say, I've worked hard and I want a fair value for what I've done, and this is the value I'm placing on it. And we just decided that, look, you don't have to use the locked value. It's just a nice option, right?
Yeah. Options is the main thing, which is, I suppose, one of the great things about what you're doing here, because I was going through all the features. So you've got chapters, transcript, sound bites, value, clips, zaps. I don't know if that's a feature per se. I haven't used Nostr much, so I don't know much about zaps.
Yeah, just think of a zap as a like.
Yeah,
that's
okay,
it.
But
I don't want to leave a comment. Yeah, it's a boostergram without a comment, right?
Gotcha. Yeah,
that's it.
Okay. So it will be interesting. I did notice the gamification. Unfortunately, it is very heavily in my favor at the moment, Sam, because when I was trying to do all of these things, I was noticing I'm getting stuff coming in through Alby. So I've had incoming sats for, let me jump here. I got 10 sats for a zap, 20 sats for a play, 10 sats for a suggest, a login, 100 sats, all of these different things. But I still haven't been actually able to use the boosting or the streaming. Is that coming online soon? Is that
that's there now? So
it's there now?
And when you say you haven't been able to use it, if you just play an episode, that will stream naturally. And start to charge.
We'll have to look at that maybe after this, because when I was trying to stream, I did set my own streaming amount, and I just looking at my wallet, nothing was coming out of it. So
the question I'll have, the outgoing, if you're looking at the Alby dashboard, right, on the website will show you the outgoing. But if you look at the plugin, the outgoing doesn't work. It's a failure of the API, and we can look at it after. But if you have authorized, and this is the other critical part, if you have authorized your wallet in the sign-up process, then we basically, as you play, we have read-write access to your wallet. And so what it is the streaming is using your real-time Alby API access to take that 100 sats per minute. Without that, we can't do per minute payments. And boostergrams, again, if you go in and leave a boostergram or a comment on an episode, and put in a comment, click a time point where you want that comment to appear, and then put a sat value, and you can put 0 if you want.
Yeah,
that will take the 100 sats. So what you're seeing right now is super early still.
of course. Yeah.
What I'm not doing is refining the gamification yet. The goal for us is that when you first join and you complete a number of tasks, you will get 10,000 sats in your wallet. That's for every new user. We firmly believe that's the right thing to do, because somebody like yourself who's experienced sats and knows what they're doing, fine, 10,000 is just oh well, okay, thank you very much, but I've got probably much more in my wallet, but that's a nice thank you. But for the newbie who's never dealt with sats, who hasn't had a digital wallet, who doesn't really know what to do with it, the worst experience would be to log in, then go and play an episode, and then the first thing we do is go, oh no, we'd like your credit card and top up here and put in your money, and they'd be like, oh, screw this, I don't want to touch it. We feel that putting 10,000 sats in gives them an immediate value that they can then go and play 2, 3, 4 episodes, and they can see what's happening. Then the activity stream in their profile will kick in, and then if they look at their Alby wallet, and they'll see they've earned some sats as well from doing stuff, and they've earned some. And so that capability through gamification to see that different outgoing and incoming. So what we've done is we've said, if you listen to a creator, then you pay. But if you create value in the system, I create a comment or I share or I whatever, then yeah, we think you should earn some stuff from that, right? And that's where the badges and leaderboards will come in, because if you're a true fan of an episode or a podcast, then you'll be the first to discover it or first to play it, first to share it or comment. Those sorts of gamification elements will get you rewards in the shape of sats, but also leaderboard status. And we think that's a good thing to do. So yeah, we'll see how it goes, but that's where we're going.
Yeah. So some of this is very reminiscent of Oscar's app, Fountain, which, Oscar's based in the UK as well. I know you guys have talked a lot, so I'm sure you've learned a lot from him. What did he say about his experiments, which he still is continuing, of rewarding users for this, and how successful has that been for Fountain? And is that kind of what gave you inspiration, or?
No. So again, if you go on YouTube and you look back, I've been doing gamification for probably the best part of 2 decades. So a previous business of mine called Bagsy was all based on gamification, and I showed Oscar, because we met, and Oscar's a great guy, and we are friends, and we are co-competition. We are not really competing. And I've said this to Oscar before, it would be crazy for me and Oscar to compete. Why compete over 5% of the market with Mitch at Podverse when 95% of the market with Apple and Spotify is what we really want to go and get? So instead of competing with each other for the same users, which is not really healthy, let's go and convert the other 95% to come and use one of our platforms, right? And I don't really mind whether it's me, Mitch, or Oscar. There's enough users out there for all three of us. So on that score, I don't see Oscar or Mitch as competition. I see them as co-competition. And then, we'll have friendly
Oscar says the same
feature.
thing. Yeah.
And that's how it should be. In terms of gamification, we've spoken. Oscar's taken a slightly different route to me, and that's fine, and that's the way it should be. So I think Oscar's leading the charge in many ways in the app space because he's more well known. I'm not even out the door, right? So he's off and running a year ahead of me. So he had to seed the market by paying people to understand what this whole micropayment system was about. He couldn't come out the gate going, pay me. And they would go, no. So he cleverly went, I'll pay you 10 sats as a streaming value, right? or here's some boostergrams. And so he's gently introducing the concept of payment and earning within the Fountain app, and he's done a great job of doing that. I'm wishing him well with his fundraising that he's going through, and hopefully he will then be able to raise the bar to the next level, right? I think if I haven't spoken to Oscar directly on this, but I imagine what he really wants to happen, and which is what I want to happen, and you'll notice in Podfans we have this thing called budgets again. So in the podcaster on Podfans, you can set a budget of 100,000 sats, right? And we have this concept of what we call negative sats. So let's say you've got a brand new show, it's got a trailer, it's 4 minutes. Now, you don't want people to pay to listen to your trailer. You want to incentivize people to listen to your trailer. So you make the SAT payment negative in the admin, your dashboard. And you say, right, so if you listen to my trailer, it's a negative 100 sats per minute. There you go. You'll get 400 sats for listening to my podcast. Now, you can't scrub it. You can't fast forward it. You can't rewind and play it 50 times. You can play it once. You can only play it at the normal speed, and you can only listen to the whole thing. If you stop playing it, we stop paying you. It's totally designed on a per minute payment system. And yes, so you might be paying 400 sats out to all your new listeners. So we've built this idea of payments out and payments in, very similar to Oscar. And he's got an activity stream. So have I. If you go back into my history in the W3C, you'll see I was part of the original activity stream team. So I've got a history of gamification activities and all of this stuff. Oscar's done a great job, though, of implementing it first, and I'm trying to implement it maybe with a little twist and a little change to what Oscar's done, but we are very similar, yeah.
I think the budgeting can be quite a unique aspect because, as far as I'm aware, none of the other apps have anything like that. And it's very different for me. I'm not the standard case because I have sats coming in from my shows, and so I've very, very rarely, I think I've topped up once or twice maybe in the last 2 years, because I've just kind of almost matched it. And funnily enough, thankfully I've been able to increase. So, I used to be a 5 sats a minute type of guy. Now I'm at 21 just for the Bitcoin number.
Yep.
And, hopefully in the future that will rise as well. But I can't imagine other people coming into this, and it still is hard. There was a guy here in Brisbane who wanted to get one of our shirts, and we're like, you got to kind of reach this 100,000 sat limit and of boosting in or support, and then we'll just ship it to you. And he still wasn't able to get satoshis with his debit card in the Fountain app, because just some of our banks here, some of them will let you, some of them won't. It's very hard for me to recommend as well, because it works for me, but then also, you go and try them with maybe the Commonwealth Bank and it doesn't work. But that aspect, I think, of the budgeting, once you actually do have some, is really cool, because most people, it will have to be a voluntary thing, and the continuous topping up or of having to watch them per se, having something where it's like, in a monthly limit or in a weekly limit, you're not going to go over 10,000 or something. That could be cool. And even perhaps a modifier that changes your streaming limit if it notices like, oh, you're getting towards the end of the week and might want to halve it or something.
I can go into more detail on that. We've got some clever stuff in there, but going back to the early days of the internet, Amazon, you weren't even using the internet from what you told me and how young you are, but the fundamentally, people didn't trust paying online. So people would get to a checkout and then they pick up a phone and get their credit card out and phone a call center to make the final transaction payment, right? Mm-hmm. And your bank, when you did make an online payment, would instantly, the fraud department, come and phone you. They don't mean to really go to Disney and buy that online, sir. And it's like, yes, I did. Why are you stopping this? Well, it looked like it might be fraud. That whole mistrust and misunderstanding by banks is because it's just at the bleeding edge of new, right? And now Of course, you don't think twice. You've given Amazon your credit card, you click one click at purchase, and boom, next day there's a package at your front door, and you don't even think twice about it. That whole trust model exists, and there's no call centers for Amazon. Now, in the same way, banks are now going, Sats, what the hell's a Sat? Why are you buying Bitcoin? Kyrin, someone's scamming you, mate. Come on, stop it. And that's fundamentally, that will change. Again, we go back to, we are at the bleeding edge of early days. And when people understand the vocabulary and when banks see more transactions occurring like this, they'll be much more comfortable with it. So, yeah, I think it's just a time thing.
Yeah. What sort of users do you think are going to be coming on, and who are you perhaps trying to attract? Because like you said, you're not going to have every show on there. Although it is really cool that you're going to have all the value shows. That's a good start. And then also how you've got a lot of features for the podcaster as well to come on and alter things in there as well. Who are you going to be targeting more first? Podcasters to come onto the platform and then tell their audience, hey, check out Podfans, or people, listeners coming and discovering kind of Podfans first and then telling their favorite podcasters about it, or a mix between?
I think early adopters is, if I was being generic, early adopters is the word I'm looking for. Mm-hmm. Having you come on with your podcast and claiming your podcast and using the platform and changing some of the features in your RSS because you've got that functionality in our dashboard and being able to then tell your listeners is the ideal. That is the golden, right? Because you understand what a SAT is, you understand what RSS 2.0 is, you understand how to create content, and suddenly you can use some of the more advanced features that we've created and enable your listeners to understand that by coming and saying, look, just in many ways that I listen today. And I'm happy for people to say that at the end of it. Oh, if you want to try this, go to Fountain, right? That is just the given conversation. Now I just want to be part of that conversation where you might say, try Fountain, Podverse, or this new one called Podfans, and I'm on there as well, and we'll see what happens, right? But yes, the early adopter like yourself would be ideal. In terms of users, it's interesting. So Captivate, Blueberry, RSS.com have all enabled value for value and some of the podcasting 2.0 index tags / features, right? And they're beginning to market out to their user base about what they're doing. Now, I won't go into the detail because this is probably competitive, but I've done deals with all of those where we get co-marketing funding with them. So they will be marketing Podfans when we're ready, not quite yet, to that base of people who are now been made aware that they have in the hosting side a wallet, and they've been made aware of that they've got a person tag capability and whatever. And suddenly they come to Podfans and boom, all of that starts to appear for them. Now, they might not be early adopters like you. They might be, somebody called it Auntie Mary, who doesn't really understand all of this, but she's pressed enough buttons and then she's come to our side. It all seems to work on our side as well. And suddenly in her wallet, it's starting to get sats. So, it's an uphill climb. I'm not going to say it's going to be easy, but if all I did was try and do Apple or Spotify, and just have a subscription model or an ad-based model, I should give up tomorrow because I'll never win that one.
Yeah, correct.
I'll lose that day one. So I've taken a different position, same as Oscar, same as Mitch, and we are betting our shirts that the model and the market will change to a micropayment system. And if it doesn't, for whatever reason, then, we won't be here in a couple of years' time.
Yeah, for sure. It's almost like a bet on humanity, because I've been thinking about this recently, and especially the people who I've seen not get value for value and really struggle. And it almost seems to come down to this. If you don't have kind of faith in the goodness of humans, in that they will, if they're not forced to pay, that they will still at some point pay. And I've noticed this myself when there was this guy I used to follow called Rush V. He was a writer, helped me a lot with especially like women troubles I was having with, social anxiety, things like that. Lots of really helpful advice. And I never paid for anything. I remember I used to go onto LimeWire to find his books and things like this. And then eventually, just over, it must have been such a long time, 10 years maybe even just a little bit more, a little bit less, was when I went, what am I doing? I've got enough money here to actually support this guy. And so, then I started buying merch that I didn't even particularly need, but just because I wanted to give back to him finally after such a long time. And there does seem to be something like that where if you don't believe that humans can change and will eventually come around, and I get it, if you find a new show, it's not like you need to be spraying sats immediately and giving back to them. Sometimes it can take a while to get into it, but I think you're betting on the right horse, at least personally from what I know about humanity. I mean, and myself.
I think there is this. Look, going back to Web 2. Look, people use Napster. They download music for free. People went on to various other mechanisms to get illegal films and whatever. It just became hard. It just became painful. It just didn't become fun to do. And for the small amount of payment that was available to go to Apple and download music, or go to when Spotify first came out, or Netflix, right? It became, the complexity was removed, the simplicity was there, and therefore it's like, I don't want to think about, can I get this film off 3 different P2P servers and whatever. I'm just going to get it because I want it now and I want to consume it, and it's not a big price. I think eventually, I don't know why podcasting is this. This is one of my bugbears. We now pay for music, we now pay for books, we now pay for films, but we seem to have this preconception that podcasting should be free. And I don't know when that will change, because that's the critical part, when people start to say, you know what, actually, podcast is content and it's good content. I shouldn't get it for free, just as I don't get my music for free. And in that sense, I'm not sure when that will happen. I don't think subscriptions is the way forward. Just as much as we all pay for subscriptions on Netflix and Disney Plus and whatever. But actually, if you put a peer-to-peer a value for value system onto music, books, and films, it would be a much more fairer system. I don't know how many books you read. I have
a lot,
and I've got I've got a lot of books on Audible that I've only gone 3/4 of the way through, but I paid for the full book. Right now, a fairer system in a value for value system would be that I pay per chapter, or not per minute, but per chapter maybe, or per minute if it's an audiobook, right? Same with music. I listen to tons of music, but I sometimes don't listen to the end of a track, right? But I'm still paying for the full track. I think there's a step change in humanity, as you said, where we realize that actually we should be only paying for what we consume. Now, the model for doing that is value for value, but that model is so niche in terms of the number of people who know about it, the number of people who are aware about how to use it. And that just has to break out into the mass market. And once people get that, then they'll put pressure back on content providers like Spotify. Say, no, you're $14.99 a month. No, I'm not paying that. I want to pay per track, and I want to pay per podcast. It may take a few years.
Yeah, for sure. I like to provide real world examples as well, because you probably would have encountered this. And when I say you, I mean the audience at some point in your life. Busking is a pretty classic example. You see buskers on the street. They've got just a thing out there. They're doing their thing. There's kind of a implicit thing that if you're hanging around for long enough, you probably should chuck some money in, and it's not enforced in any way. You can do that whatever you want. Another one, which is particular to me, that I only thought about recently. Have you ever done a walking tour, Sam?
No, I haven't, but I know what they are. But no, I've never done one, no.
So especially in hostels, you'll see a lot of flyers and recommendations for these free walking tours, which you can do. So I did this when I traveled all across Latin America. Most of the big cities, more than 1 million people, they'll have a walking tour of some sort. And usually they go from start in the city town square at some point. You go out. Sometimes they'll take you to various places, have you get on the train or subway or metro, take you to some places, or if you're historical enough, like Buenos Aires, you can go 5 blocks and see 10 different things. A lot of these walking tours, they advertise themselves as free, but they explain how it works, which is, I'll do this walking tour. I put a lot of effort into it. I have researched this. I've honed my skills, tell funny stories, things like that. And at the end, I just ask that you provide some money to help pay for this. I don't actually get paid by the company. And they'll have a suggestion, much like your expected value, sort of, or is that what it's called, expected value? Or
no, it's just called value.
Value. Yep.
It's not expected value.
Okay.
Just
yep.
value. Yeah.
The value, here's a suggestion, $10 for this. And then some people will pay more, some people will pay less. With broke ass travelers and whatnot, sometimes it'll be a little bit on the less side. But, I've seen richer, wealthier, older people going on these tours as well. And they'll throw in, the equivalent of $100 or something. And once again, you can get into all the tactics. So sometimes they'll throw in a bit more pizzazz at the end, herd people almost into a corner, so it's kind of hard to escape without other people seeing you when you're leaving. This is very similar to a concept from No Agenda of calling out douchebags and people who haven't paid. It's really fascinating seeing, okay, there are real life examples of this as well, and it's not just a niche internet podcast thing. No, you can find this elsewhere in the world and in real life as well.
Imagine if you could, though, at the beginning of that tour, go, it's going to be $10 per mile, and I will walk with you for the value I'm getting from what you tell me. But at the minute I'm bored or you don't give me any more value on this walking tour, I'm just going to walk off. Now, that would be proper value for value.
Yeah, correct. Almost. Oh, geez, watch out. Otherwise, you'll get into like that Solana walking app. But yeah, correct. Yeah, the problem with this is, yes, if there's no ability to do it and watch the value change. I had this girl who I didn't particularly enjoy. About midway through the tour, I went, I don't want to stick around any longer. So me and a friend of mine just left. Now, she got no value from us. I think she should have got some at least, but it was also like,
how do you trade
the limitations.
Right?
How
Without
can I do
it?
Should I stop right in the middle? I only want to give her like a couple of bucks. Does she even want a couple of bucks? All those sorts of things. So this is where the digital money and the programmable money aspect comes in, which is really, really cool.
Yeah. One other feature we've added, again, we are adding a lot, and since you even looked, is we've added a new feature called support. And so one of the things that Adam asked was, how can I support an episode or a podcast creator without listening? I don't want to do a per minute listen, right? I don't want to stream it. So I might be away, but I still want to support you for the 2 episodes that I might come and listen later on to. Right? So what we have in our system is called Become a Fan, because that's the same as subscribe, but we are Podfans, so become a fan, and I'm a fan is when you have subscribed. And at the same time, you have a budget in your user settings that says, I only want to spend 100,000 sats this month, and we do an auto top-up. If you turn the toggle on, we can auto top-up. But you might say, right, I'm going to leave that set to streaming. So every episode I listen to, I'll just stream it, and the amount I stream is the amount I pay, and I can set my own value for that. Great. Job done. The other side of it is I'm just going to go and click at this to support. So for every podcast that I've chosen to be a fan of, I'm going to pay whatever value the host has deemed the value. I'm going to support you. So if it's 100 sats per minute and 10,000 sats, if I've clicked the toggle to support, when the new episode drops, boom, instantly, you get 10,000 sats. Whether I listen to 1 minute or the whole episode later on, that is not the issue. I'm here to support you. And so that whole payment for that episode at the value set by the host is what gets paid. I think that, again, is something that we've just added.
Yeah, I think that's also a pretty big game changer for this podcast, the Mere Mortals. Dave Jones has, through magic, internet, sage, wizardry, created a cron job thing which sends in weekly on the dot a big rush boost to the mere mortals. I don't know how much he listens. It's he used to boost in every now and then. Maybe he hasn't tuned in for a while, but he's got that exact feature, which is very much like the PayPal feature of being able to contribute X amount per month. Similar, I guess, to the Patreon one, except Patreon is very much, once again, you're restricted to whatever levels that they choose. And yeah, I've used a Patreon a couple of times, and I can't stand it. I've got one for Andreas Antonopoulos at the moment, who's helped teach me a lot about Bitcoin, and it's almost like a daily struggle when it gets towards the end of the month. It's like, should I cancel this or not? Like Patreon is such a bad. It degrades the experience of listening to him, just the platform they have. But anyway, it's a whole nother story. What do you? So let's just say a year or two goes by. What does success look like for you? Actually, before we get onto that, how are you going to monetize this for yourself? So obviously you're putting a whole lot of effort into this. You're rewarding the users as well. Are you going to take a split from this, much like Fountain does and much like pretty much every other podcast app does? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, in the ecosystem, it's really funny. All of the hosts get a payment, right, from podcasters, right? So you go on and you put your podcast up and you pay Buzzsprout, Blueberry, RSS.com, whoever, and they get a nice little earn, right? So every other thing they do beyond that, whether they provide you a little website or they give you some transcription service or whatever it is cherry on the cake for them. They've got a core business. For some reason, the app providers and app developers don't have the option to charge. We don't have a $4.99. I guess if you asked Oscar and Mitch how many people actually pay for the subscription version of their service, the premium version, I bet you the number is quite small. So there doesn't seem to be that element of we will pay the app developers. Again, paying for a podcast seems anathemic. So why would I pay for an app to listen to it when I can just go back to Apple or Spotify for free? So we don't have that option. So yes, we have to take a fee through the transaction. And with splits and fees within the value for value, and I'm glad it's become much more clearer, or at least I understand it. From my perspective, a split is for people, guests, producers, editors, whatever, and fees are for services. So whether it's a transcription service or in our case, an app platform. So yes, we do take a transaction fee, and we're very much upfront about that, and we will be very clear on what we take. We will also later on provide additional services for hosts. And so again, we would expect to try and take some small fee from that. Again, if you set a budget and there's a transaction flow, we want to be in that flow, right? Again, in the value for value system, the value that we provide as a platform has to have some value back to us, right? So yeah, it will be a transaction payment within the flow.
Yeah, cool. And yeah, so getting on to a couple of years' time, what would be great for you? What do you think would be counted as a success, or you'd be really proud of happening with the platform, with Podfans?
Well, success is making sure that we've built a small team and we have a user base and we have broke even and we have revenue, right? Those are initial metric successes, right? So that it doesn't become a self-funded business, but actually I can take a salary and pay other people, and we can build a proper business around and add more features. I added in music support last night, and so now if you're a music artist, you can upload your RSS into Podfans and play music tracks or albums even. It doesn't have to be a single track, and get a value for value payment. We've added video, right? So now if you support the alternative enclosure and you have video within your podcast, you can now have the user click between audio and video, but we charge per minute of video, just the same as we charge per minute of audio. So, and the last part is we have a friend who runs Penguin Books. So I expect to do a deal with Penguin, to have audiobooks. So for me, I don't mean this to sound stupid, but it doesn't right now from where I'm sat. We want to challenge Spotify. And that may sound, you might be going, okay, is it really only 8 o'clock in the UK? Have you been on a spliff this morning? You need to go back to bed, mate. But you've got to have a bigger plan. And podcasting is fascinating and I love it. But the platform for value is bigger than just podcasting. And people will get to understand that more when you add more content that they want to consume. So if there is a music track and they go, God, yeah, I love that, and I'm only paying so much for it, great, that's great, and a book and whatever. Suddenly, the incumbents, Audible, Spotify, Apple, and others are going to have to start to think, hang on a minute, people are getting this other way of consuming content and getting value, and that we're not giving value here because we're charging you up front a large amount. Oh, maybe we should move that model. Maybe they'll join the party, but for success for Podfans, yeah, it's a multi faceted digital content consumption platform where value for value is at the core.
Yeah. I definitely think that the value for value model will win as long as you can just break even. It's that funny aspect of money, which I find money insanely boring, and it's if I'm doing it right, it's really boring, and it's all the fun things that go on behind the scenes, like getting a boost in, like seeing your boost read out on another show, or knowing that you have contributed to someone else and that they received that as well. It's all those kind of aspects of when I was first starting podcasting, and the feeling of speaking into the void or trying to give feedback to other people was also speaking into the void, even as a listener to a podcaster. So I definitely think a lot of the stuff that you're doing will kind of contribute to making that more apparent, I guess, even if it's not in the expressions of a direct message, in terms of monetary value, it's just as, if not more important.
Yeah, well, one of the things that you and I do on a Friday night, I know you do it as well because I've heard you referenced, is listen to Dave and Adam on their show. So we listen live.
Well,
right?
I can't actually. It's actually a very early Saturday morning for me. So it's only if they're interviewing James or an Aussie where I can jump in.
Okay. So my Friday night, is listening to Dave and Adam while I'm cooking the dinner and blah, blah, blah. And it's great fun. And that's live. And, it's great. As you said, I do a live boost and boom, they mention it and it's fun and you hear it, right? And that's the old days of radio. In fact, I've just rung into the radio station. They've said, yeah, happy birthday, Kyrin, from your mum. Wow, that's amazing. And there's that moment, right? That's what live gives you. But I think also, just the first step when I go back to the original 4 comments, discovery, interactivity, gamification, and monetization, that interactivity was the boost. And that was a game changer. But that was built on Sats, right? And now streaming is there, and now support's there, and now you've got other ways of communicating. But we've added it, again, I'm sorry to keep adding features, but we have, where it's a feature that tells me what you're currently listening to right now and where you are on the timeline. So I can then click a button next to that and I jump in exactly to the podcast at the same time as you, and I can listen at the same time. And then we can actually, as listeners, without actually being live with the podcaster, have a threaded conversation. So now I know how many of my friends are currently listening to the same podcast at the same point, where I can jump in and go, oh, Kyrin, did you hear what Sam said then? Oh, I totally disagree with what he had to say there. Or James was right on, and you can have a conversation that's a threaded conversation within the app without having to have the live element of it. So again, I think there's lots and lots of different ways that we're going to be layering on ways to add value for listeners as well as hosts without having to have both available at the same time.
And that's almost hearkening back to, I suppose, the TV days where you watch a show with a family or something like that, and it doesn't need to be live, but it can be a shared experience nonetheless.
Exactly.
Yeah. Very cool.
Yeah.
Very cool. Let's jump away from Podfans for a second and just a couple of questions in the future. So I've heard a couple of other aspects that you were talking about of voice and voice taking over lots of things. Do you still kind of feel that's the future of technology, or one of the futures of being able to search, for example, not needing to type things in? How much has that changed in the last couple of years since I think
I was probably more gung-ho 3 years ago when I was
yeah.
developing Alexa apps and thinking of the potential for it. And I think Amazon have failed to really kick on with it. So my house has got 6 Alexas in it. I've got to be very careful when I talk in terms of, one kicks off somewhere.
Yeah.
But, I home automated everything, and it was great fun doing it. And in fact, my new car's got an Alexa in it, built in. Right, so windows open and close if I say Alexa, right? Totally lazy because the button right next to the driver console where I can push the button down. But hey, it's there, it works, right? And the one use case that I might ever use in the future is Alexa, turn the lights on before I get to the house. Wow, wasn't worth the extra thousands of pounds I paid to get that in. But there was a demo on Amazon many years ago of adding various plugins to the Alexa, which was the Open Table and the Uber and whatever. So, Alexa, book me a table. Alexa, do this, do this, do this. But for some reason, voice transactions have not taken off. That final ultimate element, which is what I think, if you look at what Amazon probably did it for, which is, hey, we'll stick this little voice thing in the kitchen. We'll make it literally at cost. And it will be able to allow you to go, hey, Amazon, buy me batteries, buy me this, repeat that order. For some reason, the number of people doing that is so small, because I don't know whether it's a trust thing, a time thing, whatever. There's a demo now of ChatGPT with AI plugins that have come out. Exactly that same demo, Open Table, Uber, and going to your AI and saying, oh, get me a table here in this town and get a taxi ordered. Now, if you can combine Alexa's or Google or whoever else, HomePod with an AI, because I think what we've got is a dumb AI in Alexa right now. She's intelligent enough to understand my voice and give me some basic functionality, but she's not intelligent enough to understand that when I said turn the heating on to 21 degrees, that I hadn't got the right trigger words. And unless I have the right exact trigger word to get the heating system to come on, Alexa, turn on the Nest in the lounge 221, right? And I can't remember what, all of that syntax correctly in the right order. All I'd normally say to my children is, can you go and turn the heating on, right? And she has to be that intelligent, or the Alexa female voice that I have, let's not morphize it, but the machine has to be intelligent enough. And I think AI is that missing part to that voice. So think of Alexa's and Google's as voice 1.0. I think we're getting to voice 2.0, maybe 3.0 will be here. And I think then it will all combine together very nicely. Yeah, I think it's, again, I think we've got a little bit of a nice adoption curve, and then it sort of dipped, and now AI is coming in. I think we'll see a secondary adoption curve.
Yeah, just the adding on top of everything, which is, it's so many things seem to be vying for that kind of prime position of consuming everything like the internet did. Is it Bitcoinization? Is it AIification? Is it the next one, voicification? Yeah, it is rather exciting to kind of watch the battle and see which one's going to be the biggest impact in 10 years time.
Well, I think all three are symbiotic to each other. I think me being able to just walk into the kitchen and go, play Mere Mortals, and it'll come back and go, oh, well, that's streaming at 100 sats per minute. Are you okay with that? Nah, put it back down to 21. And it just does it, right? And that could be a voice thing, right? But right now you'd have to come to Podfans, type in 21, blah, blah, blah. And so, but the next generation would be, I just want to listen to my podcast and I want to know what the value is. I'm going to set my value, bang, it's done, job done, listening, happy. And at some point in the middle of it, you go, boost, Sam there, what do you want to say? Oh, just say that was rubbish. Give him a 10,000 sats, bang, off, that could be where voice becomes much more natural. And you're listening to an audio thing. You could be on your bike, you could be running, you could be whatever. The last thing you want to do is get your phone out and go, oh, all right, what did he say there? Let me type that out for you. It's an interruption. So yes, I do see voice being an important interface, but I still think it's cluggy and it's still got a long way to go in terms of making it more natural and easy to use.
Yeah, I've never made the transition to using the whatever's on this one, Bixby, I think, on the Samsung.
Yeah.
And yeah, once again, like I said, the reluctant the reluctant geek. I found my little niche in podcasting, and I'm probably not going to be experimenting with the Alexas, the drones, the all these other sorts of things. You were talking about books as well, and it sounds like you've mostly read the kind of future focus orientated books. Is that right?
Yeah, I'm
Or like
a
manuals.
great fan
You were
of.
talking about taking manuals away on holidays, like.
Wow, I must stop talking about myself.
Yeah, that one you keep that.
Yeah. I am a geek. I love tech. I took the TCP/IP v6 manual with me on a holiday once, because I found that much more. I don't read novels. I just don't find it. Spike Milligan once said, a comedian in the UK, read the last page first because you never know if you're going to die before the end. I thought that was just funny, and I see it's value for value. I don't get value out of reading about some fantasy novel that has no real end. I mean, you could argue, then why do you watch films, Sam? Why do you watch films? Because that's exactly the same. You can watch, I don't know, any new
Documentaries
film.
or
Whatever, right? And I do. That is the relax. It's a lean back thing. So I can lean back, just watch a screen, double screen most of the time anyway, and consume. But with a book, if it's a read book rather than an audible book, then you're leaning in. And I don't. I have children. I don't have hours of time to sit down and read books anyway. And if I am going to give that time, I want to get value back. And for me, value is knowledge and learning and getting something. Going back to my original point, I guess your original point to me, which is I'm curious. So, I'm currently playing with half a dozen AI tools, right? Trying to work out how they work, what works, what doesn't. Do I think is a waste of time, or is this useful? So that's where I'm spending my time, and I love it. That's
any favorite books that you'd recommend? Ones that you come back to that you think have good learnings, insights that you've found really valuable?
Depends what you want. I mean, my favorite book of all time is called In Search of Meaning, by Viktor Frankl.
Oh, Man's Search for Meaning. Yeah.
And I think that book alone everyone should read.
That's a great one.
I just think that in itself gives you, I don't know, some real perspective on life. In terms of books, there's a couple that I've read that, a lot of the books I read, I take the core elements out of it, and I can't remember everything. I've got them all as audible books here, like a library that goes. I read one by the guys from Netscape talking about how to run a business, and I'll find the title of it quickly, which was probably one of the best business books I've ever read, because it was about being an entrepreneur and not being able to sleep at night, about having to hit payroll, about having to worry about the competition and everything else that goes with it. If I look at, okay, so I'm looking at my book list now. Codebreaker. Yeah, okay. So Walter Isaacson's book on Steve Jobs, loved that book. Total hero of mine, Steve Jobs. Yes, he was a bit of an arsehole, but he was a brilliant genius. And his phrase was "stay forever curious," and I love that. And he happened to be left-handed like me. That's about the only commonality between me and Steve Jobs. He's curious and left-handed.
You're grasping
That's where we end. Yeah, exactly. But Walter Isaacson's book was great. But his book from Jennifer Doudna, who did CRISP, is a great book. I love that. I love what's happening with genetic modification and the idea of how we can change ourselves. A book I highly recommend called 4,000 Weeks from Oliver Burkeman. again, just perspective on how long we're really on this planet. And really, all the stuff we do really doesn't matter that much. We like to think our stuff, we like to think our stuff matters. It sometimes does, but it really doesn't in the big scheme of life, and what are the values you want? I'm trying to find this one book.
I've been playing with tendonitis in my right arm for a couple of months now, and it is very much that's one of those ones where it's like, you find things which just needle you, and
yeah,
it's so unnecessary. I just need to take a bit of time off from exercising, not do handstands for a while, and yet there are certain things in life which just push your buttons.
Yeah. I mean, Simon Sinek's books, Find Your Why. I love books. Yeah, I love books about, I said earlier, behavioral marketing. So again, Richard Thaler's book on misbehaving. Amy Webb's brilliant. She's got a book called The Big Nine, which is about the 9 big things that are going to happen in the future. I'm trying to find this one book, though, that I'd highly recommend. Oh, I mean, Yoel Noah Harari's books, all 3 of his books, 21 Lessons for the Future, Homo Sapiens. I mean, totally brilliant books. Homo Deus, sorry. Yeah, I mean, I'm literally going down this list, by the way. I am literally going down a list. I mean, I literally read a book a week, right? Or listen to a book a week. And,
yeah.
And it has to be, I think, I think 3 years ago, I was reading a book called The Rise of the Robots by Martin Ford. I mean, again, I'm going back through it. One book, okay, all books aside, put everything else aside, read Charles Handy, The Second Curve. That's it. I'll stop there.
Okay, brilliant. I've I don't know if you know this, but I do a book review channel, so I'm always kind of like looking for things outside of my comfort zone. Business books definitely are not in my normal repertoire, so a couple of and tech ones, to be honest, as well. I usually go for the more classics. So I'm always kind of
Second Curve by Charles Handy, I think, is one of the most seminal books that are out there, because what he says is, while the hype cycle on the first thing is going up, so he talks from your perspective, not about technology. So as you're learning to be a programmer or a marketeer or whatever skill you're learning right now, you're raising through your skill to maximize your potential. At some point you drop off the edge because the younger, faster, quicker buck comes behind you. But if you can constantly be having a second and a third curve that you're learning on, you will always have value in the future, because while your first curve's rising and your second curve is following behind, when that peaks, that first curve, your second curve will reach towards peak again. I think that's the element of staying curious all the time, is always keeping ahead of the curve. So learning about AI now is, and I'm never going to be good enough, right? I know this now to be an AI expert, but I want to be good enough to use those tools, just as I can be good enough to use Canva, but I didn't get good enough to use Photoshop to do what I need to do. And so, yeah, Charles Handy, Second Curve.
Nice. It sounds very much like the talent stacking, which Scott Adams talks about, which is, you don't need to be the very best. A slight variation of that, I suppose, but you don't need to be the very best, but you are the very best if you're the best in the top 10%, if you're in the top 10% of 4 things, that sort of deal.
Yeah.
And which is, kind of, I enjoy those principles, because I don't have the willpower. I've never really gone all in on any one thing. I'm kind of the similar, spread myself across various things, which as well, I'll have you on, and then I'll be chatting with, a Cirque du Soleil artist the next week or something, which is, I find much more fun. You mentioned quite a few kind of prominent names, and like you said, you've worked with Netscape, so Mark Andreessen, with MicroStrategy, and Michael Saylor, and I'm not sure I'd put them in great men, but you've heard of the great men of history theory before, right? It's is history dictated by these lone individuals creating something out of nothing, whether it be good or bad, destructive or creative? You've met some of the people who I would say are almost in that category, if not they are. What do you think of that? Do you think history is written by these people creating something out of nothing, as in an individual, or is it more of the inevitable progress of humanity going forward?
Well, it is the inevitable progress of humanity going forward, but those people who push the ball up the hill tend to be the individuals, the mad people who see differently. Steve Jobs said it, to all the madmen, who see differently, think differently, act differently. Um, you know, currently now, Elon Musk is slightly going off the edge of a cliff with Twitter, but take a step back. When he took a massive leap of faith into electric cars, humanity would have not moved forward. The car manufacturers, the incumbents, would not have done it. That's the innovator's dilemma. They would not have changed their model. Google is not going to change its ad model for voice, so don't expect that to come. And AI, the reason they're dragging their knuckles is they can't work out how to do advertising in AI, so don't expect it from them. I had a funny story. I when I was at Netscape, Tim Berners-Lee, before he was Sir Tim Berners-Lee, was one of our guests at a small lunch, and he happened to be sat next to me. And I stupidly just turned around to him and said, "So, what do you do?" And he went, "Oh, I invented the web." I went, "Ah, that's nice." And I just wish the 20-something me then was the 50 me something now. I would be sat there fanboying out and asking a million questions and wanting to talk to him about X, Y, Z, and just in that sense, ask him all the questions that he has said a few things, but I've got other things I want to ask him. I have met Bill Gates. I worked at Microsoft. I haven't met Steve Jobs. I was around when Dave Weiner was Dave Weiner, putting RSS together with the guys in Netscape who invented it. Yeah, it's been an interesting ride being old, but seeing the evolution of the web from when it didn't exist to when it did exist, and all the iterations along the way, which sometimes seem to take forever, and then other days when you look back, they've accelerated beyond belief. I remember there was a thing called WAP, the Wireless Access Protocol. It was crap. It was rubbish, and mobile phones were awful, and no one could work it out. And then Steve Jobs came out with the iPhone 3 and the iPod and all these things that suddenly, and it took a genius of Steve Jobs to create something that was a game changer. Famously, Bill Gates created the Zune, which was like a music pod. And when he saw the iPod, he said, "Well, that's not very difficult to do." And then somebody said, "Yeah, but hey, hang on a minute, you've got the Zoom, but no one's buying it. So if it's not that difficult, why aren't you successful?" And sometimes it's not about the technical capability of whatever we have. It's sometimes about how you present it, how you make it simple to use, and maybe only meet one requirement of that user, but that one requirement is a significant thing. And with Steve Jobs, it was download and play music. It didn't do 50 other things, and that's where he started it from.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's always interesting when you hear about technology that is technically superior but not adopted, and why that is. That's also why I've been kind of trying to learn as much about cryptos per se. I'm leaning more towards Bitcoin's the one and only, more and more, but I'm willing to be proven wrong if something else comes through.
I think that there are derivatives of Bitcoin that people have tried to do, and ETH is one, but and then all the various dodgy ones that go beyond that. I think it will be the one that stands out at the end of the day, and I think the good thing is central banks and governments can't get to it because they don't know who Satoshi is. They can't influence him. They can't jail him. They can't threaten his life or whatever they would do to prevent it getting successful. And I think whoever he, she, it, or they were, thank you, because that's probably one of the biggest changes to humanity that we will see.
Which is probably why if Mark Andreessen had tried to do that, he's one guy.
It would have failed. It would have failed.
For sure.
But
sorry, you go on. What were you going to say?
No, but I think going back to your point, yes, Michael Saylor, madman or genius, I don't know. He certainly has foresight. I'll give him that. When I joined MicroStrategy, my first team meeting was on a cruise liner that he'd hired the whole of the cruise liner out of Miami, around the Caribbean, and my first team meeting was in a hot tub with my team. But he flew the whole company around the world 3 or 4 times a year. He flew your family to go and board them. I remember my dad sat next to me for 3 hours listening about what OLAP was and online processing. And my dad's looking at me going, what is he talking about and why am I here? And I'm like, I don't know either, Dad, but you've got to stick here for 3 hours now and learn about it. But equally, in the genius element, he was the youngest under 40, richest person in the world at one point. He has turned the surplus cash that the company holds into Bitcoin. And, he says that stock buybacks aren't the way of the future. And if the central Fed comes after his money, he could move it because it's in the digital wallet to anywhere in the world. And, and I think he is prescient in that way.
Yeah. I also remember you talking a lot about how in the early days of the internet, you were, in the UK and you were going to these groups and meeting all these different people. Do you feel that's all online now, or is there still a physical element to these sorts of things?
No, I mean, in the early days of London's tech scene, there was a small group of us, really nice, and we met regularly, did events. We were trying to make something happen in the London scene, trying to get the VCs to support the young startups, and it's taken off, and it's a very mature market now. I think with podcast movement and with the London podcast show that's coming up in a couple of weeks' time, and James and I have announced these Podnews Live events that we're going to be doing globally. I mean, starting in London and Manchester, but we will be announcing the Barcelona and Mexico dates soon, and Sydney as well.
Cool.
Well, no, actually, James says no, not Sydney, Melbourne. That's where the heat of it all is. But anyway, whichever. But yeah, I mean, I think in-person meetings, I don't know. We've been here now for a few hours, but I don't have that sense of you in the same way if you were sat across from me on a table. And I don't know why that sheet of glass doesn't give that human element to it. So I still think in person gives a depth of relationship that you won't get from what we're doing here, the digital, virtual, non-physical world meeting.
Agreed.
I think there is that element of still live, meeting people. I think that's important. I think the podcast industry reminds me very much of the tech industry in the early days. I think we're 2 or 3 years into another cycle of podcasting. I think we haven't seen its ultimate growth. I think there's a lot more to come. I think we've talked about SATs and we've talked about the apps, but I also think there's a lot more with AI to come into podcasting. I don't know what exactly, but it won't stay out of it. It will have an effect and a value in it. And I think advertisers will come to moving away from radio will come to podcasting. And I think that's where money will follow.
Yeah, interesting. Have you played around with VR at all?
I have, and I'm not a big fan. I have to be honest and say I'm a massive fan of AR, and I can't wait for WWDC, which is the Apple conference, where Mark Gurman has said this year they will announce their mixed reality headset. I personally, it reminds you talked about living in a world that you vaguely remember pre-internet, right? Vaguely, you said. And I look at my kids, they have no idea what a pre-internet world looks like. I used to buy one record once a month and listen to that to death. And now they get 4 million tracks on Spotify and listen to whatever they want, right? And same with films. And I know that I'm living in a pre-AR world that I want. I want to be able to have the device, and I don't know what it is, where the fourth wall, the layered wall of the internet appears in front of me everywhere. So I get like a sticky note. I don't know if that's going to be the right analogy, but a sticky note on everything I want. So that building, and I can learn about it and maybe eventually actually it's not a sticky note because AI knows where I'm looking and then asks, do you want to know more about it? And then ChatGPT summarizes it. There could be more ways of doing that. But I know that I'm living in a world pre-AR, and I want to be in that post-AR world because I know the value that I'll get from that AR world will be significantly higher. But the VR world, I'm not a gamer, so it doesn't really appeal to me. Yes, it's great for scientific research or engineering or something very specific as a task to learn. I've tried a couple of games on it, and it made me sick. Not physically sick, just scared the hell out of me. It was a roller coaster ride, and I'm stood there going, I know I'm in an office and I know I'm on the ground, but my brain's going, bro, you're about to fall off a cliff. What are you doing? And I didn't enjoy that experience, but for some that may be the experience, right? But I don't want the metaverse for business. I don't want to have an avatar of me sit in front of your avatar and chat. I can see you. I'm happy. I'm old enough not to want to have a cat as my head and yours as a dog, right? It doesn't matter to me. No, I think VR's not where I want the future to be, but AR, yeah, I can, again, take it back to podcasting. I'm listening to a podcast. I'm doing a walking tour like you described earlier, and there's a layer of information. I'm getting graphic cards coming in telling me what, Kyrin's doing this walking tour, and I'm getting info, and I'm like, great, this is great. And that AR audio experience, yeah, I can see that happening.
Yeah, cool. Awesome. Thanks so much, Sam. There's been really, really fun. I always like to end off with, do you have any questions, requests from me? How can I, spread the word about Podfans? Anything I could do to make it better?
I all of the above. Let me try. Yes, I think, look, you are somebody who understands this whole space really well. You've been ingested into the space. You use sats, you listen to podcasts, you create podcasts. You are probably the ideal customer for Podfans. And all I would ask you is, when you go back into it and you do another view and review of it, and you go, yep, still doesn't work, Sam. Let me know, right? Or if you find that you do think it's good and it's working, let me know. And at the point when you feel comfortable, I would really want you to become a host on there and use it in anger and see where it goes.
Yeah. 100%. Do you have a button that people can click to if they're playing around with it as well? How do you want feedback from people?
We are adding a feedback tool from a product called Canny.io. If you've ever heard of Canny, it's really a good product. So that will be added in the next week or so on the top menu right next to the search bar, and you'll just be able to give us feedback on everything and anything you like, add new feature requests, or tell us what's broken and not working.
Yeah, brilliant. And when do you think you'll have all the value shows put in there as well? Because there's quite a few that I listen to, and so letting them know.
Yeah. So the timeline where we are today fixing a couple of bugs on the onboarding that we found.
Yeah, so today's Monday, 27th of March, and this will come out on the next Sunday, so 6 days' time.
Okay. So hopefully by the time you hear this, then the onboarding's been fixed. So that's step one. We are moving to AWS off the local server that we've been working on. So what you've got right now is a local server. So adding 10,000 podcasts and pulling those in real time and having people do would not be sensible on a local server. It'd fall over very fast. So we are moving it over to AWS, and as soon as it's on AWS, then we'll ingest the 10,000, and then we'll open the door. Then we'll be in. Equally, in the next 2 weeks, we're finishing off the PWA, so it's mobile ready. So my personal goal right now, or the goal of the team, is that we're aiming for the first week of May to have everything finished with all of the features done, all of what we believe the mobile and desktop working, and also all of the ingested music and value for value podcasts that we see.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, I think I've heard you somewhere saying you need 10 kind of requests from people to get a show put in there.
Yeah.
So I was already mentally preparing the 10 people who I would force to go and be like, click on this damn button.
Or you just ping me directly.
Yes,
It's just as quick.
which is also a nice thing. Brilliant. Okay, so podfans.fm is where people should go for that. Any
Thank
other
you.
things you want to recommend where people go and check
Yeah,
out?
obviously check out James and I on Podnews Weekly and Podnews Daily.
I'd recommend that.
I mean, James is the goat in terms of if you want to know what's going on in podcasting, he knows everything. And we will be doing Pod News Live. So, if you want to come and well, there's two versions of Pod News Live. I don't know how we've badly named it. Pod News Live, where James and I are doing a B2B event, but we're also at the London show and we're going to be in Colorado doing a live show. We did one in Vegas live. We had a lot of fun doing that. We seemed to do it all right. We hit the number in terms of 45 minutes on the nose, which was quite cool. We're going to do some more lives of James and I just doing our podcast. Find us somewhere. Come and say hi. We'd love to know.
And will you ever bring back Sam Talks Tech as well?
It's been I've undenied about that. Yeah, I love doing that. That was how I learned how to do podcasting, and it was great fun. And that goes back to me having that itch from my days of TechCrunch of talking to technologists and entrepreneurs about what they're doing. I just don't think I could scale that enough to make it a worthwhile time. I think if I did come back with that, it would be a few years in the future now. I ummed with it a few months back. I really do love doing that, talking to smart entrepreneurs about what they're doing. And I learn a lot from doing those interviews, but how hard it is. Yeah. Set that up, get the interview, edit the interview, blah, 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 market it, put it out. It is a lot of work. And with me doing what I do with James and me doing Podfans and a few other things I do, I just can't squeeze it in and do it justice.
Yeah, definitely. Awesome. Well, thanks so much for spending some of your precious time here, Sam. And definitely keen to see where Podfans goes in the future.